Hey and howdy, everybody, and welcome back to Second Cup. I'm your host, Tim Heller. Today's guest is Jon Esquivel. Jon is a podcast host, photographer, and fellow Texas State Bobcat alum living in New York City. Now, before we jump into this awesome conversation with Jon, I'd like to invite you to show support for Second Cup in any of the following ways. First is by sharing episode links on social media and tagging @TimHellerCreative. Second is by rating and leaving reviews in Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening and watching. And finally, if you'd like to show support financially, you can Venmo @TimHellerCreative or reach out via email to tim@timhellercreative.com to discuss sponsoring one or several episodes. Any and all of these actions mean the world and help boost the show's visibility, so thank you for considering, and thank you if you've already participated. Now, top off your beverage, get comfy, and enjoy this episode of Second Cup.
I had a hard time falling asleep last night, so I slept in an extra hour, got up at 7, and took Stu out, and now I'm on my second cup. Huh?
Amazing. This is awesome. This Riverside Suite. I've never seen this.
Thanks. Yeah, I have a friend that I used to work with in New York who recommended this to me when I was starting this. And I saw the software and kind of how everything worked. And I've only had like one or two little technical glitches with uploads and everything.
Okay.
But it's been great. It's been super easy to pull everything down and edit.
That's
and
awesome.
It's nice. It's pretty dope.
That's great.
Thank you for coming on and having
Yeah.
a chat. I'm excited to see you and get caught up. It's been since I think in person seeing you. It's been before the pandemic.
Yeah, so
One of the classic like New York tropes of if you don't live in the same neighborhood, you don't see.
yeah,
you don't see.
it
your
really
friends.
is true. It's so funny how that works out, and it's not anything on purpose. It's just how life works out in the city.
Yeah, it truly is. Well, catch me up on what you've been up to. I know you've got a podcast going on, and your photography has been popping, and I'd love to just kind of also get an intro of who you are, what you do, for everybody listening.
Absolutely. So my name's Jon Esquivel. I am the host of the Jon's Mostly Movie podcast. It's what it sounds like. It's a podcast mostly about movies, so we'll dive in also to TV. There's been really anything that's trending on the internet can kind of just show up there. So whether it be something pertaining to video games or even just current news, go in and it's actually kind of just the format's being redone. So I started doing it in the pandemic, but didn't publish anything. It was a lot of just practice and speaking into a microphone. In theory, you're like, oh, I talk, so you just put an object in front of me. It's going to be the same.
Should be a piece of cake.
Yeah, it should be a piece of cake until then you're there and you're listening back to it and you're like, well, you start really hearing cadences and you start learning, okay, this is where I get off track. It was a couple of months of just recording, listening back, learning. And then a buddy of mine, James, he helped put together just essentially the way to get it out there. Like the life, I had to just focus on like creating our breakdown, getting guests, and he took care of on the technical side.
Wow,
So
that's
it was
fantastic. Awesome. Yeah, it's interesting whether it's starting in voiceover or starting a podcast or whatever you're doing, like even just like creating content for the internet. It's like, oh, I can do this. It's a piece of cake. People say like, oh, you don't have to create the content. You are the content. And then you sit down to do it and it's like, hey, everybody, I'm a banana. I don't, huh? And it takes
like, suddenly,
a couple
what
times.
do I talk about?
Yeah, it's like, why am I an alien all of a sudden?
But yeah, and then on the photography, I actually had taken a break from the photography during the pandemic because so much of my photography was in studio, so close proximity. So obviously during the pandemic, it wasn't something that I could do. And I tried outdoor photography, like with mask prior to any sort of vaccine. It was fine, but still, like with everything with the pandemic, I just found my focus was not there to create. It honestly wasn't until probably this year when my old roommate put a film camera and film in my hand and, gave me just a breakdown, and I fell in love with it. Just because Yeah, I mean, I love shooting in studio, digital, everything you can do with that. With film, it just it slows down that process because you are limited into the amount of photos. Like for a photo shoot, I can take up to like 400 photos. Like, just we're searching through, but we're gonna just like cut that down to like
fire away.
Yeah. And let the model just kind of play. And then sometimes that's how you have your, happy accidents of, I didn't expect this pose, but this comes out and there's just something that's, radiating from it. And then on the film side, it's like 36, shots. And
yeah,
it's just a lot of it is focusing on the composure of it, which is really nice. And you do, for me also, like I've always had a love for movies, and that's also why I, as a hobby, like to like film short films and things to that. It puts you in that mindset of seeing that, because film is just a ton of moving pictures. I know we forget that, but that's where it stems from. It really does have your brain slow down and compose that shot. And it's fun. And obviously, like with everything retro being in right now, having a film camera, they're like, oh, that's great. Yeah. People are a little more
that's
like,
so cool. Very
so
Brooklyn
cool.
of you.
I know. I couldn't help myself.
That's so cool. And so, like, now with that camera providing some kind of parameters or some kind of constraints, how do you feel like your work has changed? I know you said that you're focusing more on the composure, but have those limitations affected your creativity at all?
Absolutely. So it's kind of one of those, like there's always those like exercises, like in writing, they tell you, to limit it to telling that story in 10 pages or something to it. With this, it got me outside of working in a studio, because so much of what I find when everything's limited and you can only, the only thing I can really control is what's in front of me. Candid shots are what are the best. So it does take me out of, okay, I have this just main frame to work with, to when I'm like, if I have my camera, I'm a little more observant when I'm like walking around. I'm taking my time, because you can miss a moment, but sometimes a shot slowly builds. It's not like right then and there. Like I might see, for example, outside of my window, there's a cross street there. And a lot of people in the neighborhood always come through with their dogs. And, you can get the idea of, well, what would happen if it was raining and, it looks cloudy, looks like it might rain, and there's still people coming with the dogs. I bet you that would be really cool to see people getting a photo of umbrellas, maybe the dog walking by. So like it forces you to kind of look and see things to that. So even though on a sunny day right now it's not raining and that's not the situation, you kind of remember, okay, well, the situation could build to that. Whereas like in studio, you're like, great, I'm going to adjust the light here. You're going to go there, all that. So it's the constraints on it really do make you think and unlock different muscles of your creative brain that you didn't know that were there.
That's awesome. That's so cool. I remember when you first, I think it was around the time when you first got started doing more photos and stuff like that. We were both working for a certain fruit company, and they had a product come out that had a wonderful camera on it. Is that how you were primarily shooting for all the way up until the pandemic, or was until you got your film camera, or what was that kind of process like of gear and working with what you had versus like just buying a bunch of stuff you didn't know how to use?
It was actually, my old roommate Steve was the one that kind of would continuously have this conversation with me. So yeah, I started with photography as far as like, I'm going to take photos of people using what I had, which was a iPhone. And within there, Steve gave me a breakdown of, this is photography, this is ISO, this is exposure, this is shutter speed. These are just the things that you need to know. And from there, it was working with what I had, because at that time, I really had no budget to go towards anything of photography. So you're figuring out lights, you're figuring out, well, I have a window there, and then you start building. Eventually, I did get a camera to start. I got a Canon Rebel, and the main thing, though, was the lens. That's where I was like, okay, I'm going to spend my money on. Because a lot of times photography, you have your main body, and what really can take that photo or like, you know, quality to another level, it's not always the body of the camera, it's the actual glass and the lens. So I invested in that, and that's where I got what I have right now, which is my 35 millimeter lens, and that's what I primarily shoot with. Whenever you see any sort of inside studio, it's usually with that lens. And I still have yet to upgrade my camera because a lot of it is just when I talk to Steve, and you know, I could always, and it's just more of, okay, I need to sit down and see what I want. But there's still a lot that I'm like putting in and learning, and that I can do with my current one. And I think with photography, it is very easily, you know, you do want to just continue to upgrade and continue to jump onto that next equipment. But there is something about slowing down, and because I've done both. I've done where it's like, I want to get that, and I've gone to that. And I've also then, like, as of recently, slowed down using the stuff that I have. And it helps. I think it's something where it only gets you more prepared for your next camera, your next equipment, and anything to that. And like with iPhone's made it super easy for people to just kind of get the workflow of, hey, I see something, I want to take a picture. Hey, I wonder what it would look like if that picture was a little darker, or maybe if like the blues popped a little more. So like, it is a great starting point. And I think, I mean, just in my opinion, like, there's no reason why you couldn't start that if you wanted to jump into photography. You don't need a camera for that.
I love that. Just with, I mean, what you were saying about like that wanting to leap to the new equipment because it's fun and exciting and it makes you feel like you are a photographer, to be like, oh, are you on 35 or 27 or what would you like?
Yeah,
but it's I feel the same way with microphones and stuff. And I've got an engineer friend that I text with on a regular basis of like, oh my God, I can't wait to upgrade to this and that and like do all this stuff. And I'm like, but my mantra since starting all of this has been grow as you go, and really like
smart
and work within the constraints that you have. Because I have found that when I have more of a schedule or a routine, or I have limitations, like with this podcast, I've got 20 to 30 minutes. That's when I work the best, is because then I know what the rules are, and I know what I can kind of bend to make work a little bit. And then I really know how to use all of my stuff.
How did the idea of all this come together? Was it something that was already circulating in the back of your mind for a second cup, or did it just kind of organically?
Thanks for asking. I've wanted to do a podcast for a while, but I also wanted to create something that wasn't just some 20 to 30-year-old white guy talking into the internet again, and really and really create something that I felt would contribute something to at least one person, right? And so when I got this job that I just wrapped, it was going to take 5 weeks to do, and it was going to be an all-day record every day, and something possessed me to say, okay, you should start your podcast now, because you have 30 minutes and you can't just ramble, and you can't just shoot the shit for 2 hours and create something that really isn't of value to anybody or yourself. And so when I started thinking of ideas for what to do for this, it was literally just putting that post out online saying, who wants to talk to me? Like, or not who wants to talk to me, but I want to talk to you if you have something to say or you have something to share. And it's really turned into a wonderful place for people to come and be vulnerable and talk about whatever they're doing or whatever they're navigating. And I feel like I know so many incredible people and artists and people not in the arts that are navigating these really difficult things in their lives, or experiencing extreme abundance in some way, or just like have something cool that they're working on. That I just want to connect all of the wonderful people that I know to one another. If people can touch base, then that's great. And we'll see what it turns into. You know, I'm really just doing it to selfishly. It's like I can I get to talk to my friends again, which is great. And I've talked to people from when I was like in preschool and elementary school in California, and people from college like you. And it's wonderful to see where everybody's at.
That's, interesting that you said the job and you had mentioned, I don't know if you have felt this. So one thing, as far as on the artist thing, that the biggest thing I was navigating was I got comfortable in that job, and a lot of my creativity felt suffocated. So I think it's something like artists struggle with a lot. We want our art to pay the bills. And I would say it's something where it's not always the case. I mean, for some people, yes, it is. And I'm so happy for them into that, because it's well deserved. But it's not yet the case for like the majority. And so I do believe like we try to navigate these, what they call the day jobs, the muggle jobs, the survival jobs, whichever. For me, and I don't know if it's the same for you, growing up, but like going through, I would say like post high school, I always thought like I needed just a part-time job. Couldn't be full-time. It had to be part-time. It had to have that flexibility to that way I could navigate if I was doing auditions. I could navigate if I was going to be on set, a shoot, something. And the more and more like working a quote part-time job for 10 years out of, what's funny is I started a full-time job this past summer, and I've had more time for my creativity than I did with the part-time. And I think a lot of it is, one, due to the pandemic, there is a lot more flexibility that we are finding, and workers are seeing their value, which is great and it's needed. And I think a lot of other people are seeing the value in just all types of workers. And then I think too, it's really because like, even though I was only working, let's say like 28 hours, the other bit of time was me recovering. It took a toll. It was a lot of,
I mean, that job that we were working, and you worked there much longer, and you actually helped me get that job, which was freaking sweet. It was so exciting.
Yeah. I mean, you did the rest, man. It was all you.
But, but I mean, it's an intense job.
Yeah.
Wherever you're working,
people.
whether and you were taking in a lot of stress from other people and taking on a lot of stress from other people. So how did I'm so glad you brought this up. I love talking about day jobs and creativity and how you figure out how to turn your creative business into a business and something that's sustainable. But how did you I guess first, when did you realize like, oh my gosh, I'm drained and I don't have this creative energy to create the way I wanted to do anymore? And then how did you start to climb out of that well a little bit?
The first thing was looking at, when I looked at the things that I would do creatively, like, just like, I think it's artists now are artists, like we all do, like some people are just actors, some people are just this, but so many people dive into so many different projects. And so when I was looking at the different things that always interest me, I took a look at, when's the last time I wrote something? I looked, didn't really have anything. Okay, when's the last time I touched something with filmmaking? Looked, hadn't, had stuff. Took a look at, okay, well, there's the podcast ones. The podcast was consistent, but I had a podcast that was coming out consistently, and it wasn't bringing me any joy at the time. And I had no new photos. And so I just kind of realized I was going through this cycle of getting to work, recovering, trying to muster up the courage to do something creative, or the energy, and then just turning back around and going into work. So my focus was it was both that and financial. I was like, I need to get out. And so I paused everything creatively, because and that didn't really hurt, because I was in this cycle, so I wasn't doing anything creative. So I wasn't losing anything. And I think so many artists get afraid of stepping away from their art because they think it won't be there. But I love my art. I love creating. And when you step away from things you love, you don't just come. I mean, if you really love it, it's still there. That old cliche.
Yeah.
So focused on getting a job in 2022, because the last time I had applied for a job was like 2021. So like, or 2011. And so it was learning LinkedIn, all that, going through the hiring process. And then once I found the gig that I'm at, because I'd found one beforehand and it was terrible, but it helped me like kind of learn what I wanted. And once I found the gig I was at, I really was able to get comfortable, and I found myself like, this isn't taking stress out of my body. And I found myself with more energy, and I, started, instead of immediately like, great, I can create, I'm going to start putting things out there. I started like, okay, well, since I'm starting back up, there's certain things on the technical side on the podcast that I wanted to learn. So I was able to book meetings with people and literally like, hey, can I pick your brain, watch your workflow? Like I have a buddy who has a podcast, and he took me through his workflow, the tools that he used, and was able to catch up because I'm feeling refreshed. I'm feeling social again. When it comes to shooting, I'm able to reach out to people. Hey, because for me, when I'm feeling drained, it's a lot to interact with other people. It's how it goes for me. So having that energy again, and it's not like it's everyday sunshine and rainbows, but it's more, I would say there has to always be as they say, a balance. But in this one, like, it was very much skewed to one side of most days I was strained and not having the energy to go and create. Whereas now it's like, now I have those human days. We all have those days where we don't want to create, and we sometimes need them.
Yeah.
But now it's like those days come and it's like, no, I need to take a break today, rather than like, oh great, another day. Here we are.
I'm forced to not do something. Yeah. I love how you said that with having those human days and taking that step away from something you love, because it's on alumni panels for Texas State, and for people listening. John and I both went to Texas State. We both graduated the same year from the theater department. Taking that, something I share is, it's okay to take a step away from auditioning all the time, or from trying to create, or from trying to do whatever you need to, or whatever you feel like you're supposed to do in order to find like what you need to feed your soul. And like taking a step away to focus on a different job or career and coming back to it can often lead to a much more rejuvenated and authentic version of yourself after focusing on this one singular goal for so long. And something that Jess has done, and Jess is my wife, internet. She like really in the middle of the pandemic felt like she was finally able to give herself permission to say, I need a break and I don't want to be on this grind anymore. And she has been so incredibly intentional about taking this step back and focusing on something else, and really even more than the something else, really focusing in on her and what brings her joy and what feeds her soul more than what she felt like she should be doing based off of her degree, So I'm glad that you were able to find that, and that you are still finding that and
still finding it.
Discovering
it. Like I've always felt like artists and athletes are very similar, and that's, I mean, everything from like being behind the camera, like, and observing other people who are auditioning, booking, not booking, whichever. Regardless of the booking or not booking, the ones that I see that always have the same genuine, and you can tell, like you learn to tell and read people, but genuine energy and all that are the ones that know how to handle their own recovery physically, but mentally. Yeah. And I think it's a huge step to be able to acknowledge and say, I need to recover, and be a little selfish, because like we hate that word. We never want to be selfish. We don't want to live in a selfish world.
No, especially if you grew up in the Midwest. Being selfish is going to send you straight to hell.
100%. And like in Texas too. And it's the same. But you learn like, no, this is the type of like selfishness that anybody who loves me would 100% support. They'd be telling me, you need to do this. And so the person who needs to be telling me to do this the most is myself. And it's learning that. Yeah, like, that's hard. Good on her.
Taking the advice that you give others. And it's so important. And especially as an extrovert, you constantly giving. And this is something that Jess had to teach me, was that if you need to set some boundaries and not pack your schedule so you have time to like process your emotions and like take care of yourself as well. And it takes a minute to get there.
It's so easy. You're like, but I could see so many people. There's so many activities that could be done.
We're in New York City. People are everywhere. This is great. All of my people.
There's a guy I don't know right there.
Every chapter of my life, and who knows who you could meet, right? Where could that lead?
No, but it's smart. It's smart to have those boundaries.
Well, Jon, thank you so much for coming on this morning. It is genuinely so great to see your face and to hear that you are finding your creativity again. You have found it and are continuing to discover, and have found a different job that is allowing you to really have some flexibility to focus in on yourself and be a little bit more selfish. Where can people find you and your podcast and everything?
So photography wise, most of my work's going to be posted on Instagram. Hopefully you'll start seeing more trickle out. So it's JON_ESQUIVEL. And podcasts you can find anywhere you get your podcast. Type in Jon, no H, mostly movie. And it should pop up. Or if you have any questions, you can send me an email at emails@jonsmostlymoviepodcast.com.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I'll link all of those in the description of this episode as well, so that people, as they're listening, can just pop over there and click on a link.
Yeah. Podcast should be coming back in October.
Oh, sweet. All right, folks. October. Jon's back, baby. I have a couple quick fire questions to wrap us up. So just 1 or 2 word answers. First thing that comes top of mind. And here we go. What's a nickname your parents used to call you?
Boy.
I don't know why this has become my favorite question to ask, because every single nickname is gold. What's a piece of content that you're consuming right now that you can't get enough of?
Attack on Titan, the final season.
Attack on Titan. Amazing. Who inspires you right now?
My partner.
And you can only have pizza one more time, and what's on it? Where's it from?
It's going to be pepperoni mushroom, and it's from this spot down near West 4th called Artistic Pizza.
Ooh, Artistic Pizza. All right, if you're in New York, go down to West 4th. It's down by NYU,
I'm not saying it's
right?
the best pizza, but I'm just saying there's just certain tastes where if I can, you know what? I just got to go that route.
Perfect. Awesome. Jon, thank you again. It is so awesome to see you, and I look forward to seeing everything that you turn out and listening to everything that you turn out.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Second Cup featuring my friend Jon Esquivel. To keep up with Jon and his photography, check out @Jon_Esquivel on Instagram. That's JON_ESQUIVEL on Instagram. And check out his podcast at jonsmostlymoviepodcast.com. JONS mostlymoviepodcast.com. All these links are in the episode description as well. If you enjoyed this episode of Second Cup or any of the previous episodes of Second Cup, I invite you to show support for the show in any of the following ways. First is by sharing episode links on social media and tagging @TimHellerCreative. Second is by rating and leaving reviews on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're consuming podcasts. And finally, if you want to show support financially, you can Venmo @TimHellerCreative or reach out via email to me at tim@timhellercreative.com to discuss sponsoring one or several episodes. All funds will be used to improve the show and provide the best experience for the guests and listeners alike. Tune in next time for another incredible conversation and to hopefully learn something new from a really cool person. Bye.